Fable II, the sequel to a highly successful and critically acclaimed RPG. The first game was a success, and fans wanted more, so this entry had its work cut out for it. The game was based around a similar premise as its predecessor, Choice, but this entry would lean a little bit heavier on the world and the story that it wanted to tell. The combat systems and RPG mechanics would also be upgraded and polished to appeal to a wider audience. All of these decisions would lead to a game that wasn't necessarily what the original Fable had set out to do, but it also didn't forego the idea of choice entirely. It landed somewhere in between. Fable II was walking in large footsteps, but could it fill those shoes? That's what we're going to take a look at today in the second part of my Fable retrospective. I'll be comparing this game to the first Fable quite a bit, so if you haven't seen the first part of the series, I would highly recommend going to check that out first. I'll be looking at Fable II's story, gameplay elements, and general overall package. As always, I'll try to be as comprehensive as possible with this video and cover everything. Before we really get into things though, I wanted to tell you that today's video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid is a mobile role-playing game with a full campaign, raid bosses, clan activities, and tons of heroes to choose from. You know I have a bit of a soft spot for lore, and Raid actually has a surprising amount of it. Specifically the orcs who were annexed from their land, forcing them to become nomads. Now they're seeking an ally in Queen Eva of the Elves, who they're not sure they can trust. If you want to find out more, you can play the full story in Raid's thrilling campaign mode now. Each orc has their own interesting design, like Grohak the Bloodied, who has this awesome red horned helmet. And there's a bunch more orcs that have their own interesting design and unique personality. But this is the best time to get started in Raid, so if you click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on the screen, you'll get unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion, Ina, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get into the game. All of this treasure will be waiting for you here. Now let's get back to Fable II. Fable II was, interestingly enough, not available on any system other than the Xbox. It never had the luxury of a PC port like the previous game. Lucky for me, Microsoft has some decent backwards compatibility, so I'll be playing this game on the Series S. Like I said in the last video, Fable is heavily based on morality, so I'm going to continue the trend and cover both my good and evil playthroughs in this video. This is also the second part of my Fable series. I'll be comparing this game to the first quite a bit, so if you'd like some more context, go check out my video on the first Fable game. So let's dive deep and find out if Fable II can live up to the original. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I want to talk about Fable II. Fable II was announced in 2007. Lionhead Studios would return as the developer, along with most of the original team. A majority of Fable II's development story was detailed through a video diary released on Lionhead Studios' website. These interviews with various team members reveal exactly what the team wanted the game to be. One of the largest new features that the team wanted to implement was an expansion upon the emotion system. They wanted players to feel that the NPCs in the game were genuine and that the interaction with them was genuine. This was something the team felt that they couldn't accomplish with the previous game and wanted to really hammer it home here. Peter Molyneux was also involved with the sequel and specifically wanted players to be able to read the emotions of characters and understand plainly what they were feeling. The team's biggest approach to combat was the philosophy of one-button combat.
A lot of people have said, you can't put combat on one button. What I hope this video diary says to you is that you can.
This was the idea that you would be able to do multiple different things with one button, and thus make the control scheme more approachable. Clearly, their idea here was to make the game easy to pick up and more palatable for the general public. They also wanted this to extend into the magic system of the game, making spells easier to choose and use. The team also wanted the world to seem a bit more colorful this time around. They wanted to age the world forward and get away from the full medieval age, introducing the game to some slight technology. One of Molyneux's bigger focuses was co-op. Introducing the ability to be able to pick up a controller and play with friends was a focal point for the team. Overall, it seemed that the team wanted to expand on the things that Fable had done, but also take some new risks and introduce quite a lot of new mechanics. Fable II released on October 21st, 2008 for the Xbox 360. Fable II begins by introducing us to the game's all-new cinematics. These rendered scenes actually look pretty good for the Xbox 360. I was playing this on the Series S, but for a 13-year-old game, you can't be too mad. You can see its age at certain points, but for the most part, they hold up. It was also a nice change from the previous game, actually having cutscenes that weren't just models from the game half obscured by the camera. Lionhead does decide to undercut this entire thing though, as they are wont to do, with the bird we're following defecating on our character's head. It's very Lionhead of them. We're introduced to our main character, who we can now choose our gender for. Our main character lives in Bowerstone, and the sequel is set 500 years after the first game. In the same vein, Albion has changed drastically in those 500 years, and we'll see how soon enough. Our Sparrow, the nickname given to the main character, and his sister Rose long to see Castle Fairfax. This building towers over the lower areas of Bowerstone. Lord Lucian is the head of the castle, and these days he's pretty reclusive, his wife and daughter having died in a tragic accident. During this introductory segment, our main character travels through the city with his sister. We come across a traveling caravan of mystical goods, led by a man named Murgo. There's a music box that takes our interest for 5 gold, but we don't have that kind of money. We are slum people. A woman shows up lined in white and red robes and tells us that the music box is important.
He has no idea what he stumbled upon, but you have an inkling, don't you? Some part of you wants to believe it's magic.
What? You really think it could be?
For 5 gold coins, you could have your answer.
For 5 gold coins, we could eat for a week.
Listen to me, Rose. At the end of that week, you and your little sparrow would be no closer to your dream, no closer to the inside of that beautiful castle.
Since Fable II takes place so far into the future, one great change with the world is its move towards technology. The team plays with this idea of rejection of will and the embrace of science, but I don't think it's ever a real plot line. It just makes up some things that certain NPCs say when they see you using magic. We decide to gather up the money for the box by doing some quests around Bowerstone. We help a guard collect lost warrants, pose for a photo, destroy some beetles in a man's warehouse, get a man's stolen bottle back, and deliver a love letter. During our scrounging for gold, I came across a dog left in the streets, cold and alone. He took to us quickly and began following us. This prologue has a similar premise to the first game. It's trying to introduce us to the world, but something's off here. The choices aren't as blatant or obvious, they're a little more subtle. Guarding the warehouse from beetles, a man offers us some money to destroy the man's warehouse, but it's also the same amount of money that we get from protecting the warehouse. So there isn't really an incentive to be evil here. This is just a small example of a large problem with Fable II that we'll touch upon much more in a bit. Once we bought the music box, we took it to a quiet place. Supposedly, the box would grant us one wish. I turned it on, but when it activated, it just disappeared. We went back to our house, a small hovel in the alleys of Bowerstone. This tiny little reveal that the main character and his sister live in this hut is kind of an oddly emotional one. It's so small, and I'm not even sure it was intended, but the entire time I was running around Bowerstone, I just assumed that they lived in a small house with their parents. Turning the corner and seeing this little broken down shack, 2 lonely children's dreams freshly crushed, was a little heartbreaking. We were awoken in the middle of the night to guards telling us to come to Castle Fairfax. Our wish had come true, and Jeeves, the butler, guided us through the castle to see Lucian.
Hello, young masters.
Hello, sir.
If you'd follow me, please.
Where is the grand dining hall?
Oh, in the north wing. Lord Lucian hasn't been in there since the tragic deaths of Lady Fairfax and little Amelia.
Face to face with the man of such power, such regal integrity, he wanted us to stand on a platform.
Well, speak up. What did you wish for?
To live in a castle, like this one.
Perhaps that could be arranged. I'm working to rebuild... Well, I'm working on something wonderful, for which I need individuals with particular talents.
The platform glowed blue and then suddenly red. He said that one of us was the one he was looking for, and the other 3 hadn't been found yet.
What happened?
Yeah, there was...
What's that light?
Quiet! You're heroes, but you're not any of the 3. One of you is the 4th.
What's happening?
This isn't what I wanted, but nothing must stand in my way.
No, wait! Don't! No!
I can't allow you to live either. I'm sorry.
He needed to kill us both to be sure. He shot my sister in front of me and then me next. Our hero goes flying out the window, but the woman from before arrives and tells us dying is not our destiny. Our hero is asleep and recovering for a decade, our loyal dog companion beside him the entire time. When he awakes in a gypsy camp, the rescuer woman tells us that it's time for our journey to begin. We find out quickly that this woman is named Teresa. She's also blind, telling us that she's the same character from Fable, the sister of the hero of Oakvale. This sort of confirms that the canon ending from the first game would be the good one, something closer to our Saber playthrough. Fable II never confirms this though, and there's even legends in the game that say the hero of Oakvale took the Sword of Aeons, which would canonize the evil ending. I think this is the genius of Fable, that the story we played before is now just a legend and is passed on through unreliable narrators who don't know what happened. Teresa is also possibly 500 and some years old here. I'm assuming her Old Kingdom lineage is keeping her alive. This is where we're given our first quest. We must journey into a tomb outside of the camp and find our destiny inside. Before we get to that, let's go over combat. The upgrade systems and the general segregation of combat specialties is mostly the same. We have strength, will, and skill, and gain experience from each, as well as general experience. The main difference here is the way combat is actually implemented. This is where that one-button philosophy comes into play. You can attack normally with your swords, but there's a soft lock mechanic that works much better here. No longer do you feel like you're swinging wildly through the air, hitting whatever is in front of you. It now feels like you've actually targeted an enemy and are focusing them without having to purposefully lock on. Your character can also do special moves based on the environment or the position of the enemy, slamming their head off walls or stabbing them on the ground. Through the upgrade system, you can gain counters, flourishes, and the block ability. Flourishes also work much better because they can be charged up and used at any time, rather than only when you've gotten your combat multiplier high enough. Skill is greatly changed as well with the introduction of guns into Albion. During these last 500 years, Albion developed gunpowder and flintlock mechanisms from technology acquired in the eastern country of Samarkand. This means that we don't have to charge shots anymore. Ranged combat is pretty simple, and upgrades can provide aimed shots. Will is still our magical skill, and we have a great variety here just as before. Pressing the B button will activate the spell you currently have selected in an area of effect attack. Pushing the left stick in a direction when pressing this button will target one enemy. Holding the B button in either case will charge the ability, and if you have it unlocked, cast a more powerful version of the spell. You can equip different spells in each slot, effectively being able to time your charges and cast multiple different spells each time without having to switch. This works so much better than the previous system and actually made me want to use Will more. They've also done away with the mana bar, which I can't say I loved. This would make you think that Will is incredibly overpowered, but they've also weakened the spells considerably, so it's not that much more viable than anything else. Spam casting spells is a viable option of gameplay, but each hit with first level spells does so little damage that it just takes forever to kill anything. I will say the combat balancing was done a lot better in this game. Previously, skill was incredibly overpowered, and it really didn't make sense to use anything else. You could level it up so fast and just one-shot most enemies, especially with the multi-shot spell. But now, each specialty feels like a viable option to use in any situation. The negative side of this is that even though most of the systems are on an even plane, they all just feel weak overall, at least at the beginning. And I didn't really feel like I got to a point where I was incredibly powerful. It seemed like the enemies were always scaled to a certain amount with me, and were always just on my level, and don't get me started on my bad playthrough. The other change with XP-related systems is the way you gain experience. Somehow they made it even more cumbersome than it was before. Now all XP, including specialized XP, that's the strength, skill, and will experience, is dropped on the ground. Not only do you have to collect all of your experience by holding down a button, but you can no longer move while doing it. I truly have no idea why this change was made. I just know it seems incredibly pointless. The team has also made swapping in and out of weapons mid-combat much more smooth. You can attack a few times with a sword, fire off a couple shots, and cast a couple spells without really having to be slowed down. The combat just in general feels much more smooth and less chunky. It honestly made fighting that much better in this game, and I found myself not minding when I was being barraged with groups of enemies. We head out to the tomb with our dog in tow. I've named him Perry. The dog is a great feature that Fable introduces that we'll talk a lot more about later. He always follows you around and can find hidden treasure or dig spots for you to search. He also assists in combat and can be upgraded. You can interact with him, play fetch, praise him, punish him, or teach him tricks. It's incredibly easy to fall in love with this digital animal. I mean, you put a companion dog in a game and people are gonna love him. That's just how this works. He has his own opinions of you though, depending on how often you praise or punish him. Who would want to punish this dog though? I journeyed into the tomb, finding it to be the ruined remains of the Heroes Guild. After the defeat of Jack of Blades and the dissolution of the grand evil of Albion, the Heroes Guild became lazy. They became selfish, and with the discovery of guns, citizens rose up to change the hierarchy. They revolted against the heroes and destroyed the guild itself. Even though the heroes were gone, this ushered in an age of great philosophy and technology, changing Albion forever. Cities grew much larger and more vast, and new dynasties rose. Some heroes survived this, but the days of heroes and magic are long gone, at the beginning of Fable II, at least. Inside the guild, we find the Chamber of Fate, the murals of the hero of Oakvale's story gracing its walls. We gain the ability to use experience and to use Cullis Gates. These work mostly like before, as a fast travel system. But now, we can use our guild seal, given to us by Teresa, to travel anywhere, anytime. It's incredibly convenient and makes traveling a lot less arduous. As we leave the guild, Teresa wants us to head for Bowerstone. She tells us that Lucian, the man who tried to kill me, is at the Tattered Spire. He plans to rebuild the tower, to channel its immense power to grant his wish. This is the same tower from our previous history lesson, the one that was built by the Old Kingdom. If you haven't seen my video on Fable, then you're missing out on some pretty important lore that you should probably go check out. Our main goal and the framing for the entirety of the story is to recruit 3 powerful heroes. These heroes don't know what they are yet, but under the Reformed Guild, with Teresa as a tutor, their power may be unlocked. These are the hero of strength, the hero of will, and the hero of skill. Our first target is the hero of strength. But before that, we have to make it to Bowerstone, and to do that, we have to take out a bandit camp nearby, opening the roads. We take out Thag and his band of ruffians, and we're about to free some prisoners when a man approaches. He wants to keep these people as slaves, but I don't let him. They deserve to be free. As you can probably tell by now, alignment has returned in Fable II. The system has been expanded upon in many ways, but the core mechanics are the same. If you do good things, your alignment will shift towards good. Do evil things, and it will shift towards evil. This will affect your appearance moving forward and how people react to you. Along with the original alignment, renown, and attractiveness scales, Fable II added 4 more: purity and corruption, funny and scary, love and hate, and wealthy and poor. Strong and weak and tall and short were also added for physical scales. I thought that these were interesting and served to add to the subtlety of your character, but overall, I didn't notice too much of a difference without actually diving into the systems and trying to change my character's stats. The purity scale is actually the one that most affects the gameplay, because along with base alignment scales, it affects your appearance. Your purity is not really changed much by your choices, more by the things you do outside of your main quests. Having sex, charging too much for property rent, or drinking a lot will make you more corrupt. Eating vegetables, doing jobs, and having a happy family will make you more pure. Your dog's appearance is also reflected by your choices in the game as well. The interesting thing that I found was that different combinations of purity and morality can have different physical changes, and can award you with titles to use in-game. If you have high good on your morality but high corrupt, you'll have pox marks on your face, bags under your yellow-green colored eyes, and gain the decadent title. If you have high evil but high purity, you'll have red eyes, gray skin, and black hair, but gain the fanatic title. It's interesting that playing this game less extreme has become a viable option here. I think overall the upgrades are good and serve to provide some complex feedback for how your actions alter the perception of yourself to the public. Ultimately, I think that to the average player though, most of these won't really matter. It does further the original goal of Fable though, to have the world react to the player and their actions in an even more intricate way. When I got to the city, I needed to make the fated decision, my title, and the hero's name for this playthrough, Blade, a successor and callback to Saber from Fable. In Bowerstone, I took a job to make some money. Fable II expands a lot upon the extra activities that you can take part in. One of these is getting a job to make ends meet. You don't make money from doing hero work because heroes aren't a thing anymore. The only gold you'll find is in chests or dug up from the ground. Fortunately, there are a ton of ways to make money in Albion. There are 3 minigame jobs that you can take part in: blacksmithing, woodcutting, and bartending. They are each press A at the right time minigames. They get pretty droll over time, but they can be a great way to make money. The longer you chain button presses together, the more your multiplier goes up, and you can make a ton in these jobs. The best one for me was bartending because it was incredibly consistent. You also get promotions after earning certain amounts of gold, which increases the gold that you earn. Outside of this is non-mini-game jobs like bounty hunter or civilian displacement. Bounty Hunter sees you capturing criminals, and Civilian Displacement sees you capturing random civilians to take to labor camps. These are both the good and evil versions of each other, obviously. In these, you usually have a description of someone and have to find them and force them to follow you back to the drop-off point. I found that these took a while, and I would often end up getting my capturees killed on the way back. If you want to make the real dough, though, you can get into property management. Most of the buildings in Fable are purchasable, even the shops. You can own an entire city if you want to, and if you have the gold for it. From this, you'll gain revenue every day or every 5 minutes, as the game says. It tells you that you'll gain gold even when not playing, but it didn't seem nearly as fast as when playing for me. From the property screens, you can redecorate houses entirely to increase their value, buying furniture from various shops around the world. You can also increase or decrease rent, which brings your purity up or down. Blade always decreased the rent. Finding Teresa in Bowerstone, she gives you a deck of different tarot cards. These foretell your hero's fate in the game to come. Different cards show the coming story and forebode a choice that we will have to make, just as Teresa gave us the first time around. She wanted me to travel to Oakfield and find the first hero. I had to make my way across the country and through some hob caves. It was nice to see these creatures make a return in the sequel. A lot of the enemies from the first game would make a return in some form. The bridge to Oakfield is broken and some bandits have taken it over. Making our way past them, we arrive in the small village. Oakfield is a strange place. It's a bastion of color and simplicity in a sea of evil and gray. Right outside of it, bandit camps are abound, and just up on the hill is the Temple of Shadows. But this town sits outside of it all. Its grass still green and lush, mostly because of the Temple of Light that sits above it. The temple was founded by Albert the Luminous. They complete rituals that concern holy water and the fate of Oakfield itself. A golden oak grows, and every 10 years it drops a golden acorn. This is then replanted and seeded in the ground. The golden oak that then grows from it bears its fruits in the lushness of the town around it. Here, I took a side quest job to get rid of the bandits in the area. Afterwards, I took one from a ghost atop a cliff face overlooking the sea. Apparently, years ago, the ghost killed himself after his love, Alex, didn't want to marry him. He wanted me to get his beloved to fall in love with me and then propose to her and give her a letter that he wrote, basically pranking her super hard.
The luckiest woman in the world. I never thought I'd find happiness again. I never thought I'd deserve it. There's something I've never told you. I almost got married once before. He was a sweet boy, but we were both so young. Too young. I got scared and ran away the day of the wedding. I hurt him so badly. He took his own life.
I went to Alex and made her fall in love with me, but when confronted with the decision of whether to prank her or not, I chose not to. I decided to actually marry this woman. In Fable, the choices were pretty cut and dry. Protect the farm or steal from the farm. Kill Whisper or don't kill Whisper. But Fable II does away with this. A lot of the choices are morally gray, and you really aren't sure what effect the choice will have or which one is the right one. Was I to deject this woman because she was kind of the reason the ghost killed himself? Or should I take her for my own, thereby not hurting her, but not giving the ghost what he wants, and making him suffer in the afterlife as well? It seemed selfish to take Alex for my wife, but I guess it seemed the best of two options. This, in the end, was the good choice. Upon returning to the ghost, he told me that he realized this was what needed to happen, and it helped him to pass on into the afterlife.
You fell in love with her, did you? The strange thing is, I'm not mad anymore. I feel at peace. I asked you to do such a terrible thing. I'm just glad you knew better.
This moral grayness definitely helps to make choices more realistic, but makes it harder for someone like me who's pursuing an extremist playthrough. But now I had a wife and a home. It was a little harder to go out on quests now, but I still managed. Having a wife can have a lot of implications. You can set the household's budget for the week, which will determine how happy your family is when you're away. You can also have relations with your wife and choose to, use protection or not. Yeah, Fable II got condoms. You can have children, which I mentioned before, and it seemed like Alex definitely wanted children because she wouldn't leave me alone about it.
What do you say we go to bed early today? Know what I mean?
The expression system overall and interaction with NPCs has been greatly upgraded in Fable 2. First of all, the introduction of the expression wheel just makes the whole thing simpler, instead of having to bind things to keys and bars. There are also just a lot more useful expressions, and you can even use expressions during certain cutscenes and events to change the flow of conversation. This new system incentivizes actually interacting with NPCs and trying to gain their favor. Certain NPCs will even give you gifts if they like you enough. The expression system is also used greatly in the civilian displacement job, convincing people to follow you back to the labor camps. Or you can just use it to show off trophies and flirt with ladies. Like I said before, this system was a part of Fable, but I don't feel that it was utilized to its full extent there. It also wasn't the most intuitive to use. Secrets were pretty prevalent in the first game, and they're also pretty prevalent here. Demon doors make a return with the same system as before. Complete the door's request and it will let you inside. I think the doors are done quite a bit better in the sequel, because the environments on the inside are a lot more appealing and interesting than the first game. These little pocket dimensions boast character, intrigue, and questions. What is this little world, and what's going on here? Those questions are never answered, but the mystery is part of the fun. I can't really say that the rewards live up to this, though, because most of the demon doors didn't really feel like they were worth going through the trouble to open them. Another secret that's been added to the game is gargoyles. These little stone rascals will hurl insults at you all over Albion. You have to find where they're located and shoot them. There are 50 in total, and you'll be rewarded for destroying them by heading to their lair under Bowerstone and collecting the loot in increments of Gargoyles Nullified. These rewards, again though, are not worth the trouble you're going to go through. Most of Fable 2 is like this, and going out of your way to find treasure and secrets rarely feels like it's worth your time in the end. Eventually, I met up with the Abbot in Oakfield. He's the senior member of the Temple of Light. It's time for their ritual. Once a decade, the Order must send 2 monks into a cave to water the golden acorn. One of the monks is the Abbot's daughter, and he wanted me to go with her.
Now, nourishing the golden acorn is done with holy water from the wellspring of light. But the spring is located in a nearby cave, which is said to be quite dangerous.
His daughter's name is Hammer. She's a large, red-haired monk who is completely passive and doesn't want to fight. So we're going to do the fighting for her. We protect her in the caves while she transports the water. Once the ritual is complete, one of the temple monks comes rushing in and says the abbot is being attacked. Hammer runs back to the temple, but she doesn't act quickly enough and her father is killed.
You let him go before I break you in half! No!
Don't make me kill you too. Oh!
We don't see most of this scene, just hear it as we're trying to catch up to Hammer. The whole thing is timed perfectly, though, as we walk through the door just in time to see Hammer swing her weapon at the man who killed her father. This scene is pretty cinematic for a game this old, but every part of it hits perfectly. Hammer has to forego her passivity in anger to avenge her father. This changes her character and gives us the hero of strength. We skip ahead to the abbot's funeral, and Hammer is conflicted, sad, and angry.
Is that it then? My father's gone. The golden oak is flourishing again. So now life just goes on as before, does it?
Teresa shows up to bring her back to the guild and give her purpose. She's almost reminiscent of the hero of Oakvale at the beginning of Fable, and Teresa is taking on Maze's role here. One thing Fable II upgrades in great force is its story. The characters, especially the heroes, all feel realistic. They have goals and motivations. They have development and depth. The story feels like it has a good structure. It flows well, and the emotional and narrative punches hit when they're supposed to. A lot of Fable's story felt meandering at points and kind of random, but Fable II corrects this. I'll get more into this later and why I think it's actually a detriment to Fable's original concept. After getting hammered to the guild, I went home to visit my wife and make some more money. I took on some extra jobs. I helped two brothers out to get rid of a curse they accidentally released and headed to find the second hero. The hero of Will lives in a tower where he researches his magic powers. I went to find him, but Lucien's men beat me there. I seeked out Jeeves, Lucien's former butler. He had stolen Lucien's notes and gave them to me for 1,000 gold. I had to fight a troll to get them, but it worked out in the end. I want to vent about the bosses in Fable 2. I don't think that they're a large upgrade from the previous game's boss encounters, as they're just as simplistic and pretty droll. They do have some more complex mechanics, like only being able to hit the trolls at certain spots on their body, but this doesn't really make anything more challenging. The other thing that Fable 2 has against it is that it reuses bosses quite a bit. We'll fight this same type of troll a couple times, and after fighting it once, the little novelty that was there has worn off. These extra fights usually aren't story related, but just environment encounters. You just happen upon them when you're going to another quest, but it seems pointless. I would rather another pack of the same enemies I've been fighting than the same boss I fought hours ago. Sure, they're both repetitive options, but if you're going to be repetitive, at least make it take less of my time. Also, small nitpick alert, what is the font for this boss name? And why isn't the first letter capitalized? It genuinely looks like a placeholder or a beta version of the nameplate and is just horrible. I found a man in a cabin named Giles, who wanted me to take care of the bandits down the road. They killed his wife, and he can't sleep knowing they're still alive. I took out the bandits and defeated the leader, Ripper.
Okay, you got me. But you're not gonna kill me, right? That'd be wrong. Very wrong. Justice is what I need.
But Giles asked me to leave him alive. This was another one of those morally gray choices that I found. I wasn't sure what to pick here. Was killing Ripper myself the good action because he'd been a murderer and I was the one doling out justice? Or was letting Giles avenge his wife the right choice? I didn't know what he was going to do with the bandit leader. I wasn't sure if he was going to take him to the guards and have him jailed or torture him behind his house. I think this type of choice really gets you away from deciding what is the good thing to do, trying to get your meter up in the direction that you want, and pushes you towards what you think is right. Instead of trying to choose what we think the game thinks is good, we should be choosing what we think is good, or evil. This allows for a much more genuine choice in these situations, rather than one motivated by changing your character's appearance or the game moving forward. This type of choice also allows for a much more neutral playthrough, making good and bad choices technically contradictory in the eyes of the game's systems feels more natural. I met Hammer on the road. We needed to head to Westcliff and try to access the Crucible. The Crucible is basically the arena from the first game, but slightly changed. The winner of the Crucible will be able to join Lucien's army and would thus bring me closer to the Hero of Will. On the way, I found a couple game masters promising me different activities to take part in. In Fable, there were quite a few game masters around the world who would offer you different card or table games to play. Coin golf, memory, and blackjack were some of the simple games you could play. Fable 2 expands this by creating quite a few original games that are actually interesting and complex. Spinner Box is just a variation of slots. Match symbols to win more money. Keystone and Fortune's Tower are the really interesting ones, though. Keystone has numbers listed 3 to 18. Each time a game starts, you make outside bets on the archstones. These get removed each time their corresponding number is rolled. You bet on whether these stones will be taken away by the end of the game. Each round, you make inside bets where you bet on which number is going to appear. The game ends when all the stones are removed. when both middle archstones have been removed, or when one of the bottom archstones are removed. Fortune's Tower is a game where an ascending number of cards are dealt, starting with 2, then 3, and 4, and so on. Each time a card matches with one of the ones on the previous line, and they're touching, the game can end. The gate card dealt at the beginning of the game and at the top of the tower can prevent this from happening though, once per game. A hero card being dealt also prevents any pairs from having an effect on that line. The goal is to get the highest number you can on one line and then take the deal. The deal will pay out to the value of all the cards on the current line added together and multiplied by the factor of how much your bet was. Each game has variations on it, like Bloodstone for Keystone and different amounts of lines for Fortune's Tower or extra spots for Spinner Box. These games are pretty interesting, and I didn't make any money at all playing them, but I did gamble a fair amount in Fable II. You also have a gambling level, which will increase based on how much money you spend and win when playing these games. I'm also explaining this in depth now, so I don't have to talk about Fable II pub games later. Hammer and I headed towards Westcliff, taking out as many bandits as we could on the way. Eventually, we encountered Balverines, who are a lot more vicious looking in this game compared to the first. A woman arrives asking us to save her son Robert from the Balverine lair. We venture inside and it turns out to be a trap.
What is this place? It's nothing good, we can be sure of that. Children, I bring you.
I have to hold off the horde and even defeat a white Balverine, while Hammer uses her strength to make us an escape route. On the other side, we arrive at the Crucible. Like I said before, this is basically the arena with some changes. Instead of staying in the same fighting ground and having 8 rounds of enemies come at us, we fight 8 rounds across different rooms. Every 3 rounds that are completed, we receive a trader room with the ability to buy potions or even weapons. Completing 5 of the 8 rounds as perfect will pay out the top prize of 15,000 gold. A perfect round is killing all of the enemies in the specified amount of time. The Crucible was okay, but really didn't feel consequential. It was very easy and there weren't any unique bosses, just repeated enemies and a troll to fight at the end. There is an issue with Fable II's combat that we haven't really talked about yet. Potions in Fable II are much more scarce than in the first game. There, they were in abundance, and I felt like if I bought 50, I would be good for quite some time, and it definitely didn't break the bank. In Fable II, they're pretty uncommon in the wild and pretty expensive at traders. They're also hard to find in bulk at shops, usually only selling a few at a time. This is totally fine, and I think adds to the experience by forcing you to use combat to stay alive instead of just spamming potions. The only problem with Fable II is death. When a character dies without a resurrection vial, they don't restart from a checkpoint or head back to town. They're resurrected there, on the spot, at the cost of some experience. When this first happened to me, I assumed it was a one-time thing, and that if I died again right after, I would be reset, but this didn't happen. You can't die in Fable II. Not really. You'll always revive right there in return for some of your experience being taken away. The team talked about this choice in the development diaries, and I understand their philosophy.
What we want to do this time is make sure that you feel the terror of impending death, but this time kind of take the sting out of the risk by saying, okay, we're not going to rewind the game for you. You will lose something, you will lose some experience, but we're not going to force you to play that bit of the game again, because you're obviously having some difficulty with it. So what we're going to do instead is take the experience from the environment around you and use that for your kind of one last heroic struggle. You'll rise up, kind of burst up with energy, and everybody will go flying, and the music will swell, and you'll feel very heroic for that moment.
They wanted to make the game more accessible and really have your hero rise back up in a feat of defiance, one last final outburst of strength. They thought taking some of your experience would be enough of a consequence, but I don't think it is. There were certain points in the game when I died that it snatched a large amount of my gained experience, something like 20,000 points, but that was rare. Normally the numbers were much smaller, and later in the game 2,000 or even 5,000 experience is nothing. You can lose that all day. Having almost no consequence for dying is not something that I think adds to the game's appeal. I honestly think it takes away from it, and starts to make combat feel like a chore towards the end of the game when the fights have been ramped up. The only thing that death does add as an interesting consequence is scars. If you die, sometimes you'll receive a permanent scar on your character. There's a couple ways of removing scars in the game, but it's also a genuine way to show what the character has been through in their journey. This furthers that ever-important thesis that we've talked about so much: character reflecting actions. Winning the Crucible allows you to enter Lucien's army. The game makes a considerable effort to tell you that you won't be able to return or do any side quests for some time after you leave, so I better finish some stuff up now. I visited my wife before I left. I figured if I was going to be gone a while, I wouldn't want to come back with her angry at me. I also helped the Temple of Light by destroying the shadow worshippers who were intruding on their sacred ritual space, fully snuffing out the Temple of Shadows. Fable II gets kind of annoying to look at after a while because of the god-awful HUD. Even though they went ahead and fixed the UI overall, making the menu screens easier to navigate, they turned around and made the screen a mess at any given point in time. There's just always so much stuff going on that doesn't need to be. Normally, if you're hearing anyone speak, there's an opaque box at the bottom filled with text, but at the same time, a similar box up top giving you the quest information and option to skip dialogue. This would be fine just during NPC talk, but this top box persists all the time, constantly giving you tooltips that repeat over the course of the entire game. I just found that it looked terrible most of the time, and the stuff on the screen didn't need to be there. When I boarded the ship to the Spire, they told me I had to leave my possessions, and Perry. Perry didn't like this, and neither did I, but I knew it was necessary. I left him and Hammer on the beach, hoping to see them again soon. Arriving at the Spire, there's an obvious noise, one that will penetrate the ears, a droning. It's the humming of the device itself. We meet another recruit that's excited to join the army, a steady income, and help his family. His name is Bob, and he will become our best friend at the Spire. Lucien gives a speech to all of us before we're allowed in, and this was one of the cutscenes that actually shined for me.
The world outside these marvelous walls is a corrupt, rotting husk. Reason is absent. Instead of order, there is only chaos. Chaos does not punish evil, nor reward righteousness. Chaos cuts innocent lives short, and we're to accept this as fate. I beg to differ. You stand in the center of a great instrument of change. With it, I shall remake the world, and my creation shall be unrecognizable in its perfection. But my will alone is not sufficient for such a monumental task.
I like this scene a lot. It adds development to Lucien's character, and it shows just how far he's gone. Even though he was killing children before, seeing him now looking twisted and mad, his motivations clear and on the table, he seems evil. But we can also see why his motivations are there. He wants order, and will have it at any cost. He fundamentally and ideologically disagrees with what I and the heroes stand for. His reasons are solid, and they don't feel hokey or comically villainesque, just genuine. A man that's gone too far. Arriving at the Spire, you're taken into their ranks. My head was shaved, and I was forced to wear a collar that prevented me from using my willpowers. Fully incorporated into Albion's Spire Industrial Complex. The Commandant wanted to see me, and on my way I saw Bob, who was taking to the order nicely.
Can you believe they put me on guard duty? On my first day too? I must have impressed someone.
He was excited to write home to his wife. I didn't think that was going to happen. As I met the Commandant, he told me that he would break me, as he had every recruit before. We were working on the construction of the Spire, and Lucien would make sure that was completed. The Commandant started forcing me to obey his orders. Each time I didn't, my collar would be activated, and some of my experience would be drained. This was an incredibly clever use of this mechanic because it gave me a comparable consequence for my choices. I defied him a few times, but in the end, I knew my mission, and saving the world was probably worth much more than this moment of defiance. I listened, kneeled, and begged when he wanted me to, and he let me go. Now, Dad, I know what you're thinking. Why is losing experience here a worthy consequence and not when dying? Two things. First, the experience you lose here is experience you already have banked but yet to spend. The experience you lose when dying is experience you haven't collected that's still on the ground. Collecting the experience constantly can mitigate this loss. You can't always spend your experience right away because you might not have enough. The other reason is that this is a choice. You know what the consequence is, and you're deciding that your morality is worth trading some benefits of power. Dying also shouldn't be infinite. Choices can. Time skips forward a few months, and I'm to watch some prisoners while one of the guards goes on lunch. Time skips ahead, this time a few years. Bob is still excited and optimistic. We both look gravely different at this point. Finally, the Commandant calls me to his office, and Bob is there, on the ground, in pain. The Commandant wants me to obey. He wants me to kill Bob, but I won't. I refuse. I'm knocked out for this treason, and I lose more experience. Time skips more this time, not even understanding how much has passed. During this whole section, walking to the Commandant's office, a prisoner in one of the cells has been speaking to me through telepathy. He's been telling me to obey and just stick through it. This time, I don't see him. He must have died. Everyone dies here. I had to find a guard who has a job for me, and when I get there, he's knocked out. I take some weapons off of him, and I'm hit with a jolt of electricity. It's the prisoner. He's the will hero I've been looking for, and he summoned just enough strength to get my collar off.
There. I've removed it. It took me years to focus enough will to destroy our collars and that guard. I've got nothing left, so when trouble comes, it's up to you.
Finally, I can fight. We make our way to the top of the spire, and we have to get out through the Commandant's office, and we finally get to fight the man that killed Bob. He dies by my sword, and Garth and I head out. We make our way onto a ship and get back to Albion. When I arrive, Teresa and Perry are waiting for me. He's been waiting by the docks the past few weeks. He knew I was coming home. It feels good to have him by my side again, and my bond with this virtual dog could not be stronger. Garth goes with Teresa, and we've gained our second hero, even though it took a decade. This whole sequence is done incredibly well. Going to the spire, this passage of time, and the effect that it has on the world and the player are great. When you come back, things are different. The Temple of Light will be bigger with a new addition based on which side quest you took previously. Your dog looks older. You look older. It's just a really big upgrade on the jail sequence from the first game and adds permanence to everything. I visited my wife again, and she didn't really seem to care that I was gone that much. I found Hammer in a tavern and joined all of the heroes at the guild. The last hero we needed to find was that of skill.
Sorry it took me so long. Lucian's men are all over the place.
You must be Hammer.
And you must be Garth, Lucian's lackey.
I was made to understand you might be mistrustful. I didn't anticipate your staggering wit and intellect.
Oh yeah? And did you anticipate that I like to take a hammer and whack smug little spell flingers?
He was located in Bloodstone, and to get there we needed Garth's Cullis Gate. This just happens to be located in his tower, which was occupied by tons of Lucian's men. I ventured inside, wiping out all of the forces, and when we arrived at the top, nothing happened? Wait, what? Oh, Garth must have gotten stuck. Yeah, he's stuck. He won't, Okay. I can't use the dig spot in front of him, or that makes him get stuck. Okay, cool. I'll have to redo all that. Fable II is pretty janky. Fable 1 was janky, even the Anniversary Edition, and we talked about that. But that was never janky in game-breaking ways. But Fable 2 always had me on the edge of my seat because I felt like if I did too much or went too fast, something like this would happen. There's a lot of bugs, and sometimes things just don't work out like they're supposed to. It's a little frustrating, but again, I think bugs come with the territory on games like this. I do think back to a specific moment in the Lionhead video diaries, though, when they're complaining about having the worst month for unresolved bugs in the development cycle, and it seems to me that a lot of those never got resolved.
I think bugs at the moment, some rather nasty grouping bugs in the editor, which are taking some serious investigation. What we have here, we can see that this is the last month. The blue bars show us what's been fixed, and the red ones, all the bugs that have gone in. So the last 2 days we've had a peak there, which is good, which means people are fixing things.
This was also just a time when things like this in RPGs were extremely common, and it wasn't rare to see the details not be ironed out. Once all three of us arrive at the top of the tower, we have to protect Garth while he gets the Cullis Gate working. I just want to say here, I love the general aesthetic of Lucien's men, the spire, and everything that comes out of it. It has this brutalist, dark architecture design, and it serves really well as an antithesis to the heroes of Albion. They are represented mostly by magic, nature, leather outfits, all pretty rooted in medieval. Lucien is represented by large, towering mechanical structures, brooding blackened stone, and glowing red collars. It's an incredible dynamic. Once Garth has the Cullis Gate unlocked, we step through, but Hammer and Garth don't come with me. I end up in Wraithmarsh, but get kidnapped by a random slaver. Perry saves me, luckily, and gets the keys. This seemed super unnecessary, as this whole sequence lasts for maybe 2 minutes, and the player doesn't do anything, but whatever. I guess it served to involve Perry more in the story. I'm not sure what the motivation was here, other than to make a reference to the mighty Boosh by naming this man Old Greg. Traveling through Wraithmarsh, we encounter another boss that we're going to have to fight a lot through the rest of the game, Banshee. The Banshee is pretty simple. She spits out some minions and we have to kill them before we can damage her. We have to move away while killing these minions though, because she'll slowly move towards us and try to drain our health, recovering hers. The interesting thing about the Banshee is that she'll taunt us while fighting her.
What would Rose say if she could see you now?
Most of the things she taunts us about are specific to the character. She was mostly taunting Blade about his wife and family. The Banshee goes down, and we head through Wraithmarsh. The place starts to look familiar, and Teresa tells us that this place is Oakvale. We'll find out why Oakvale looks like this in a bit. For now, we arrive in Bloodstone, looking for our fated third hero. Fable II introduces this little golden trail that I'm sure you've seen by now. It guides you to the next main quest, but can be changed to focus on side quests or jobs. I don't think this addition was necessary at all. The game definitely doesn't need to tell you exactly where to go. The world isn't that large that I can't figure out how to get around, and it honestly ruins the fun of some side quests like the Archaeologist. She'll give you papers that describe a general area and have you look for an artifact in that area. This is totally destroyed by just using the golden trail to lead you exactly to the point of the quest. Not only that, but it doesn't work a lot of the time. I found myself switching the game's focus to a side quest and then heading off toward it only to realize I was going in the wrong direction because the trail never switched. It also just wouldn't appear sometimes, and I'd have to mess around with my focused quest to get it to come back. We find our third hero, sat upon the most regal building in the city. Bloodstone is a seaport. It's located by the ocean, and most of the people are fishermen or have fishing-related occupations. Before I met the final hero, I took on a few quests. The first was to help a man find some various artifacts around the city. He's supposedly part of a church called the Temple of Benevolent Yokels, or Toby for short. This is one of Fable II's standout side quests, and it has many. We have to collect things like the Mutton of Eternal Hope and the Wine of Forgiveness. Eventually, you bring him back a Woman of the Night, and you realize you're being scammed. Here, you can scare the man out of town or kill him. I couldn't scare him because I just wasn't scary enough, I guess. So I kind of had to kill him, but that was okay, right? Another standout side quest is Treasure Island of Doom. You have to journey to a cave to find an old dead pirate's treasure map. Once you do, you fight him and take his ship to Lionhead Isle, where you search for his 10 treasure chests. These little side adventures were a lot of the times more interesting and fun than the main stories that the game itself was pushing. This is all too common in RPGs, and I think that this is because it's easier to tell these self-contained tales with little stakes and interesting premises than it is to commit to them over the course of a 10-hour narrative. That doesn't mean that Fable's story isn't interesting and doesn't have a ton of concepts that draw you in. I just think these side quests can be incredibly good and lighthearted. The side quests were also where Fable II lets its English humor come through. Through the first game, I was definitely thrown off by how the game didn't seem to be taking itself seriously sometimes, but in Fable II, it seemed refreshing. Lionhead knew the places they needed to lighten the mood and the times they needed to darken it. After gaining enough renown, I headed back to the manor to talk to Reaver. He wants me to do him a favor before he'll come with me, return a dark seal to a temple in Wraithmarsh. The Shadow Court now rules over the place that used to be Oakvale. They're the reason that Oakvale was destroyed in the first place. When Reaver was young, he accepted the gift of eternal youth from them. Once a year, he has to keep his end of the bargain, bring one of them a sacrifice. We, of course, don't know this upon journeying into the tombs, but regardless, we find a young girl who's wandered in there, and we're faced with a choice. We have to sacrifice our appearance and a permanent degradation of our life, or let this girl die. I just couldn't do that. This had interesting consequences. From here on out, I had red eyes and withered skin. I was pure and good, but I looked evil. Now, remember, this is a main quest, so the character has to make this choice in the course of their game. It's not optional. This creates an interesting dynamic. An evil character could come out of this looking holy, and a good character could come out of this looking awful. This shows us that even though our actions are represented in our character, we can't judge them by their looks. It's a bold choice for the team to make, and even goes against their core theme of the series, but it's one that delivers a powerful message, both narratively and reflected in the gameplay. I actually bounce back and forth quite a bit on how I feel about this choice. On one hand, it's representative of the entire game for me, that choice is put on the back burner a bit and story is put at the forefront. Your actions do affect the world, just not in the way that you think. On the other hand, it's an incredibly daring choice to go against that core belief, one that would have been expected from the fans at the time. Once we come back to Reaver, he thanks us for holding up his end of the bargain, and is appalled by my appearance. During our conversation, the building is ransacked by Lucien's men, but luckily, Reaver has a back entrance. We escape through a hole in the wall behind a bookshelf and head out to the beach. The rest of the team joins us, and we are cornered by a great shard. This is a creation of Lucien's, a child of the Spire. We destroy it, and Reaver reluctantly agrees to join our cause. I'm teleported back to Heroes Hill above the Guildhall with the team. Teresa begins the ritual that we've been working towards. All 3 heroes are lifted up, their powers funneling into me. When it's completed, something is wrong. Lucien's army shows up. He takes Hammer, Garth, and Reaver and traps me.
I should have gone out into the dark and found your body that night. But I was hasty. I let the bloodline flourish. And you have flourished. But this time is different. The last of the heroic blood will flow out onto this hilltop, just as it now spatters the walls of your family home. Your wife is dead. I would have left it to one of my soldiers to do the unpleasant deed. But past experience tells me one must be absolutely certain of these things.
Perry jumps in front of the bullet. Our dog is gone, and I'm not sad. He delivers a powerful speech before shooting me one final time. Then we're in a dream, back as a child. Rose is alive and we're living on a farm. She sets up bottles around the place, and we have to round up chickens. When the day is done, we go to bed, but something keeps me up. The sound of music. I can hear the puzzle box coming from outside the farm, and Rose tells me not to go looking for it, but I do.
There's nothing fun to do here now. Where are you going? Are you mad? It's dangerous out there.
Outside the farm are bodies on pikes, piles of people burning. But at the end, that magical item. We get to see the hero as he's looked at different important stages throughout the game, narrated by different characters from those stages.
For centuries, this academy trained the most supremely gifted sons and daughters of Albion, bound together by the blood that flowed in their veins.
Father! I could have stopped him!
That was something else. Best crucible in years.
All the while, he's holding the box. Now we're at the spire, saved from death once again. We intrude on Lucian completing the same ritual with our team of heroes. We don't let him complete it, and I kill him before he's done. Teresa shows up then, telling me that I have a choice. The spire is able to grant one final wish, and this time we have 3 options. The first is love. My friends and family will be brought back to life, but at the cost of all those who have died by the hands of Lucian and the spire. The second is sacrifice. All those who died building the spire will be brought back, but I won't see my family ever again. Perry, Rose, and Alex will all be gone forever. The final choice is wealth. All those who are dead will remain dead, but I would receive unimaginable wealth. I contemplated the choice for a while, wanting to bring back Alex and Perry and even see Rose again. Ultimately, I chose sacrifice. Their lives, though worth much to me, were not worth more than the thousands dead at the hand of Lucian. Garth wishes to return to Samarkand, with Reaver joining him. Hammer decides to be transported north to study with the warrior monks, as she's had enough of killing. Teresa tells me that the spire is hers to care for now, and that I must leave, so she transports me back to Albion. Arriving in Albion after the game is over is an incredibly sad affair, especially with this ending. Perry is no longer by my side, and I know he's not coming back. Completing the final side quests and doing the DLC, there's no one to tell me where the dig spots are, and looking for treasure feels futile. I head back to Oakfield just to see if Lucian was bluffing, but Alex is nowhere to be found. But whenever I think of them, I look at the letter I received from the people of Albion, thanking me for my sacrifice, and I realize it was worth it. It doesn't kill the pain, but lessens it. This sad sort of ending reflects the choice made at the Shadow Court. In Fable, doing the good thing gave you the happy ending. Your hero was better for it. He was less powerful, sure, but his sister survived. So did his friends and the other heroes. In Fable II, doing the good thing doesn't get you that. It gets your recognition, sure, but it's melancholic. It doesn't get your family back. This outward appearance of a villain for saving a woman, the death of your friends and family for saving the world. Albion in Fable II is a cruel world, even to those who decide to rise up and try to defend it. 2 DLC were released for Fable II, Knothole Island and See the Future. Knothole Island lets you travel back to the same island we visited in Fable, but it's been greatly changed. Supposedly, the people that settled the island had complete control of the weather, but they hid the artifacts deep in caves. We have to help the people who are currently going through great periods of snow transform this land into something else. These quests are unique, and I like the dynamic weather system that's introduced. It even closes off shops in certain conditions, but I definitely didn't feel like it added enough narratively for the DLC to be worth it. See the Future sees Murgo, the trader from the beginning of the game, returning to Bowerstone to sell his trinkets. Each quest we take from Murgo comes in the form of a 5 gold trinket that he sells us. Activating the trinket will transport us somewhere and begins a new quest. The first one is a town that's been cursed inside of a snow globe. The town in question is Oakvale, as it was before the Shadow Court. The town is devoid of color and is being terrorized by beings of different colors: blue, yellow, and red. Each enemy is only damaged by their corresponding combat specialty: blue damaged by strength, yellow damaged by skill, and red damaged by will. I loved this quest, and it let us see Oakvale supposedly after it had grown larger, but before its destruction. The next quest was simply a skull that's trapped a necromancer in the Celestial Keep. You have to wear different costumes and free him, upon which he fights you. The vision is started by activating a model of the spire, and has Teresa showing you a vision of the future. We see ourselves as the ruler of Albion, and the future of the continent in our child. The last one, the Crucible, is an endless addition to the game. It's basically the arena, but with just one area to fight in, and waves of enemies that you have to defeat in a time limit. Your goal is to get the highest score you can, and win the ultimate prize. You do this by killing enemies, not dying, and increasing your multiplier by hitting targets or kicking chickens during the fight. This edition was good because of its extension of gameplay. I didn't play it that much though. After beating the game, I also cleaned up some of my side quests and completed one of the best ones in the entire game. I journeyed to a manor. A man is in love with a woman from the past. He's become obsessed with resurrecting her and making her his wife. This woman is Lady Grey. He has us travel all over to collect pieces of her body and bring them to him. Eventually, he successfully brings her back to life and gives her a love potion of sorts. Unfortunately, she falls in love with the first person she sees, and that happens to be me. You have the option here of staying around and having the love potion take full effect, but I left and let the man have his peace, as strange as it was. In the end, Fable II delivers an incredibly compelling story, fixes most of its gameplay issues, and offers tons of things to do outside of adventuring and killing bandits. Before we get into final thoughts though, I'd like to go over my Evil playthrough, or at least my attempt at one. This review of the Evil playthrough definitely won't be as in-depth and narrative-focused as the previous one, because I'm using it to further my points on the negatives of the game. Also, spoiler alert, the Evil playthrough wasn't nearly as good this time around. I began my second playthrough the same way, in Bowerstone Old. I posed inappropriately for the man's photo, I gave the drunkard back his booze, and I destroyed the man's crates when the bandit asked me. Here's the important part. The bandit offered me a gold to do this, but I was already getting paid a gold by the man that wanted me to protect the crates. So what was the incentive here? Well, there really wasn't one. This whole section results in the player getting 5 gold, regardless of the choices they made. You're even paid the same for giving the warrants to the bandit group over giving them to the guard. Now, this specifically has different implications moving forward in the game, but here it doesn't really matter. In Fable 1, the prologue was important because it set a precedent for the rest of the game, that being evil would be rewarded monetarily and with power. This is an incentive to become evil and a rationalization for the player that chooses to make those decisions or go down that path. Fable 2 doesn't really have this. Making evil decisions generally nets you the same rewards as if you decided to do the right thing. People generally want to do the right thing, and making the evil choice has really no benefit other than for the sake of it itself. Fable 2 has lost the classic temptation of the dark side that made the first game so enjoyable. Giving the warrants to the bandit guard, as we'll see later, does cause Bowerstone Old to actually be decrepit moving forward. This choice has its effect, but this is actually just negative. Making the evil choice turns your old town into a slum, and making the good one turns it into a thriving village, prosperous. I made my way to Lucian's castle, got my dog friend, sister died, got shot. I woke up in the gypsy camp, named my dog Greg, and headed out to the tomb. I found the Heroes Guild, made my way to Bowerstone, and defeated the bandit leader nearby. I handed the prisoners over to another bandit and made my way into the city. I started lifting things from every house I could find, but this wasn't very profitable. I wanted to make money quick, so I went to my old part of town. The bandit thanked me for giving him the warrants when I was younger, and we see the state of the town. I met an assassin and took some jobs from him to kill some people with distinct features. The rewards for completing these evil side jobs are not nearly enough. You have to seek someone out, kill them, and either do it silent enough to not be noticed, or take on the entire wrath of the people around you. You also incur the penalties of the law if they exist in the town where your killing takes place. This is just another proof of the evil route not being really worth the trouble. I think making the sacrifice of alignment and appearance should definitely be worth the gold or power that you're offered in exchange. I made my way to Oakfield after talking to Teresa and figuring out our plan. I defeated the bandits blocking the bridge and had a sculpture made of me. As you can see, so far, most of the main story is exactly the same as previous. There are small differences here and there, but a lot of these choices don't come in the form of the main story, at least in the first half of the game. The choices you make come in the form of side quests and the objectives that you choose to take on. This makes for a more consistent story and reflects a narrative that the adventurer is either good or bad outside of his hero work. There's a reason for this, and it's the story that Fable II has chosen to tell, in its entirety. The story that Fable II tells is incredibly good, as I've talked about at length. Its characters, especially the heroes, are interesting, well-developed, and change over the course of the story. This ends up being a merry band of unassuming journeymen and women. Lucian is an interesting villain with motivations that seem realistic and genuine. The twists and turns the story takes are well done, and it has some emotional moments. But this greatly goes against everything that Fable stood for in the first place. What we have here is a sacrifice. We've given up the grand choices that could be made in the first game, the two drastic turns that the story could take for a better narrative. This is neither a good or bad design decision, just different. I think that what this game is trying to do is wildly different than what the first Fable tried to do. While that game put choice at the forefront, this game puts the narrative at the forefront. It would rather tell its own interesting story than let you develop one over the course of the game. One of the biggest advantages of my bad playthrough in Fable was that I allowed myself to wear whatever I wanted, because I wasn't restricted into wearing attractive gear. I could get the best benefits from the best armor, even if it made me appear scary to the rest of the public. In Fable 2, combat stats have been removed from clothes. They only exist to change your appearance and have an effect on the way people react to you. This has more of an effect on the role-playing element of the game. The motivation to wear clothes become to change the scales of your meters rather than to get stronger. A lot of what you do in Fable 2 is about getting your meters where you want them, rather than making genuine decisions from the perspective of your character. On the bright side, because I was doing my evil playthrough, the Temple of Shadows was open to me. I joined their ranks by eating a bunch of live baby chicks in front of them. Inside, you have access to a sacrifice machine. Here, you can bring villagers and sacrifice them to the temple. This will tank your alignment, of course, but also earns you points towards their rewards program. Completing this questline requires you to earn a certain amount of points and then sacrifice your wife at a certain time. You earn a sword called the Maelstrom when doing this, but comparing it to other legendary weapons in the game, it doesn't really come close. There's also a counterpart to this weapon that's the exact opposite, called the Rising Sun. This is obtained by doing the opposite quest for the Temple of Light. I helped the ghost who wanted to prank Alex super hard. This time, I pranked her super hard.
What? I don't understand. It was all a trick? No, it can't be true. It can't be true! No!
Turns out this definitely was the evil option because she ends up killing herself and confronting the ghost in the afterlife. I went with Hammer to complete the ritual and her father died. Afterwards, I went to Garth's tower. So, during this playthrough, I pursued another magic-focused character like I did in the last game. This system took me an incredibly long time to get used to, even with multiple skills leveled up incredibly high. Eventually, I found out, all by myself and not with the help of someone in my chat, that there's a pretty specific spell that helps the will combat system be viable. That's slow time. Slow time allows you to do just that, and slowing the world around you allows you the ability to charge up your magic without taking a ton of damage. If you have certain spells leveled up enough, they can one-shot most enemies. Once this dynamic is created, it's incredibly rewarding, albeit a little cheap. But the first half of the game was a slog, trying to get enough XP to make the system viable. Until you get strong enough spells, it's not really that useful and definitely feels like it won't ever be. But once it's all the way leveled up, you can one-shot banshees with the fireball spell. I helped the bandits out in Brightwood to take out Farmer Giles. I killed many guards and even Giles himself. The bandits ended up arriving and I killed them too. Why did I do this? Well, I don't know, because I wanted to get my alignment to shift to the other side. I didn't do it for gold, because you don't get gold for quests in Fable II. I got some loot, but it wasn't anything amazing, and I was mostly a magic user at this point anyways. I found Lucien's notes and went to Witchwood with Hammer. Before I took on the Crucible, the Temple of Shadows called me back because they wanted me to massacre the population of Oakfield. Sure, why not? I killed everyone in town. I completed the Crucible and headed for the docks, ready to leave for the Spire. Before we get to Lucien's headquarters, I want to talk about the dog, Greg. When I was looking at these games and trying to go through their distinct playthroughs, I was looking at everything through two different lenses, one good and one evil. Or more simply, one selfless and one selfish. During this playthrough, I stole, I killed, I robbed. Then I put the lens on the dog. How do I look at this dog through an evil lens? The dog changes color and appearance based on your alignment and corruption in the game. You have multiple options for interacting with it, healing it when it's hurt, giving it treats, playing fetch. The two base interactions, though, are praise and punish. During my good playthrough, I praised the dog a lot, whenever he whined, whenever he found treasure or a dig spot, or whenever he got scared. During the bad playthrough, what should I have done? Punish the dog at every turn? I did this for quite a bit at the beginning, and the first time I did it, it just felt wrong. It's not something that's helpful to your character or your gameplay whatsoever. The punish button really shouldn't even be in the game. This is an evil act, but there's literally no point to it whatsoever. And ultimately, because there's no way to view this dog through an evil lens, there's no point for the dog either. While I loved the dog in the good playthrough, he has no purpose in the bad playthrough. Do I think that they should have incentivized punishing the dog for the purpose of having a better evil playthrough? No. What I think they should have done is allow you to use the dog in evil ways. He should be able to attack innocents if you want him to, or steal items for you, therefore changing your and his corruption. The dog should be a static companion throughout both lenses, just used in different ways, not treated in different ways. Because the game doesn't punish the dog ever, it always treats him as your companion. But if I'm evil, I should be using this button, right? I never really arrived at a conclusion, and eventually I just ignored Greg for the rest of the bad playthrough because I couldn't look at him after I'd made him so sad. I went to the Spire. The Commandant broke me. I starved the prisoners, and I killed Bob when I was asked. I helped Garth escape, and he joined the guild. I went to Wraithmarsh and made it to Bloodstone. There, I married a woman of the night and bought us a home. I helped the man resurrect Lady Grey, but I made her fall in love with me just because I could. Reaver and I escaped through the shores of Bloodstone and defeated Lucien's men. We completed the ritual and Lucien killed Greg. It was still sad, damn it. He shot me and I got the puzzle box back, defeating him. Teresa gave me a choice, and I chose wealth. Why not? The heroes went their separate ways and I was left alone. You get 1,000,000 gold once you leave and a letter from Teresa. I used the gold to buy just about every property in Bowerstone and Bloodstone. I didn't bother going back through the DLC this time because they didn't really implement anything that would have been affected by choice. Choosing the third option, Love, resurrects your family and your dog. You get Rose's letter upon arriving back in Albion. This states that she is in a great big forest with lots and lots of trees, and she describes a man there that knows their family. This man is clearly Scythe and is taking care of Rose. The biggest problem with this whole playthrough was that Fable removed most of the allure of replayability. the choices weren't that much different, and when different choices did start coming into play, it was later in the game. Fable II's choice system did ramp up the effect that it had on the character's appearance, but this feature in the first game was secondary to the narrative that you were creating as a player on the stage. Playing through as an evil character cements this because there's really no reason or motivation to be doing the things you're doing. After you've beaten the game, there's no reason to really see the other side, outside of seeing what you think you'd look like while doing it. It's kind of disappointing because Fable II excels in so many other ways. It improved the combat system, developing a much more fluid style of fighting that was mostly genuinely enjoyable and satisfying. It also fixed most of the story problems with the first game, crafting a genuinely interesting narrative around characters that felt well thought out and developed. It even introduced a changed Albion that felt like a place that was meant to be lived in. With so much to do and so much to see, jobs to work, buildings to buy, and items to sell, it's easy to get distracted. But when you look outside of these upgrades, you realize what has been sacrificed for these upgrades just isn't worth it. For every area that Fable II improves upon the previous game, it moves backwards in another. I don't think I can realistically compare this to the first game though, even though I know that's what I've been doing the entire time. I think these games are two totally different beasts with incredibly different motivations. Fable was writing your own story, and Fable 2 was living in a better written story. I did try to pursue a neutral playthrough, making judgments and choices along the way, and not caring about what happened to my status meters. This was a very similar experience to what I had before, and it really isn't worth talking about too much. Ultimately, Fable 2 was a good experience the first time through, but once the twists and introduction of new mechanics are over, the luster wears off. You realize that there isn't that much under the hood that makes this entry special. Sure, blacksmithing will gain you more money if you have more physique, and you can flip people off, but it's not worth what was given up. I just think overall, I didn't have as much fun with Fable 2. I did like the game, but it just wasn't what I wanted it to be. It was technically better in some areas, and ambitiously a little bit of a reduction. Fable 2 was critically praised on release. Eurogamer loved the little glowing line that guided them to their quests, and PETA praised the game where you can emotionally abuse your best friend for being animal-friendly. The game sold hundreds of thousands of copies in just the first week, and it would go on to sell 3.5 million copies in its first year and a half. It was a hit with fans and critics loved it, so a sequel, of course, was not far off. But it would be the last mainline entry in the series before a slew of interesting projects. But that story is for next time. Thanks for watching, and bye, Dad. Hey Dad, I just want to say again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, as always. If you want to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon, where I provide exclusive content and updates. The link for that is in the description. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is in the description as well, where I post needless things constantly. I also stream on YouTube quite a bit, so you can come in and join those. We've been playing Fable lately and Elden Ring, so come check that out. The next part of the Fable retrospective should be out in 2 weeks, so look out for that, and then 2 weeks from that will be the full version with all the extra goodies in it. So get excited, because I'm excited. Dad, thank you again for watching. I appreciate it so much. I'll see you again soon. Bye, Dad.